at LPL presents Sugar Skull Applique. Today, we will cut out the design elements from fabric scraps to make a sugar skull that can be applied onto whatever you want. Clothing, bags, anything that's made of fabric. Today we'll be needing some scraps of fabric with various design elements to it. I chose to go with scraps that had more of the floral designs in them, but you can choose what you would like. Next up, we're going to need some white or ivory colored fabric, cotton fabric, for our backing. Of course, you're going to need your various tools for sewing. You're going to need an iron, several pairs of and sizes of scissors, including a very small size, thread, and a sewing machine or a hand sewing needle. And lastly, we're going to need a pattern to work off of. I just found this outline of a skull online, and you can make it to whatever size you'd like it. Finally, we'll be needing some sort of lightweight iron-on adhesive. I prefer the double-sided kind because this is going to be applique and this is going to help you apply it to the different fabrics. I'm currently using this Fusabond Light. There are other brands. I'm using the light because it is best for applique, as you can sew over it using your machine and it won't gunk up your needle. However, if you end up not wanting to sew around the edges of your applique, you can get a more permanent iron-on double-sided adhesive. Just look online for that. First, I'm going to show you how to apply the iron-on adhesive to fabric. First, you're going to take a piece of fabric with the design elements you want. You're going to place it face down, and then you're going to get your Fusabond Light or whatever else you're using, and one side of it is going to have this weird texture to it, and the other side is going to be paper. You're going to put the weird texture side down onto the back of the fabric over the design elements you want, and then you're going to iron that in place. Hold it down for about between 8 and 10 seconds, and then pull it up from the bottom. And next we're going to start cutting out the design elements I want, which are these two flowers. And the nice thing about ironing on the adhesive first before cutting is because it's going to make it easier to cut because it's stiffer. Okay, once you have your two pieces cut out, you got to peel the backing off. There's a paper backing, and you simply just peel it off, and it leaves adhesive on the back that you're going to then use to iron onto another piece of fabric. And so, again, just peel off the backing. Okay, and so I'm going to put these onto a piece of the muslin, a little scrap piece of the muslin I'm using, and holding the iron on it for 8 to 10 seconds. And now it is, let it cool off a little before you touch it. And then now you can tell I've scratched around the edges to make sure that it is fully applied. Now, as I said before, I chose more floral patterned design elements on my fabrics. And I'm showing you this is just a small sampling of the fabrics I used to do my fabric skull. One of them has some apples in it, so you can kind of mix it up a little bit too. And you can choose whatever design elements you like. It doesn't have to be floral. It can be any kind of design patterns, stripes. It could be geometric. It could be anything. Just things that you like and that'll stand out. So as you can see, you can cut very much along all the edges of this pattern that you want, or you can leave a little bit of fabric around it. You don't have to cut it right along the edges. It's kind of what I'm doing here. But again, you don't have to do it that way. I could have left more, especially on this one, this red fabric, I could have left more of that background behind my flower. Okay, and here's another type of flower that I can cut around. And this one, I'm definitely going to leave a little bit of the fabric behind it. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. So it has a little bit of the backing fabric still around the flower. Okay, now next up, I've got my pattern out. And here is all the different pieces I'm going to be using to make my sugar skull. Okay, so next we need to take our pattern and our backing fabric, and we're going to place the pattern underneath it. And then we're going to trace using a water-soluble marker, trace the outline of the skull. Now here is my project all spread out. I have my backing fabric, and I placed it on top of some cardboard so that when I iron, it will be will protect the desk I'm using. Okay, you can see here what I'm doing is I've chosen these two apples to use as the cheekbones. And I'm just putting the pieces in place. I'm not ready to iron anything yet because I am trying to figure out how I want to arrange this skull. And so I'm kind of putting my pieces down, and I'm going to do this in sort of layers. So I'm going to layer with some larger pieces first, which is exactly what I'm doing here. I'm kind of just placing them all around the skull, filling in some edges, and then I'll take a few of the medium kind of pieces and place a few there as well. Okay, and then I'm going to take my iron and iron each of these. Again, we do it the way that I showed you, which is to hold it down for about 8 to 10 seconds on each one, and then that way the adhesive melts enough. And of course you want to check and make sure that each of the pieces is being fully adhesed to the fabric backing. Okay, and so I'm making sure with this little pair of tweezers that everything is fully melted down. And you can see I've found a few places where I'm going to need a little extra heat. And just bring out that iron and get that done. Okay, so that's my first layer. And so I've kind of sped this up so you could just kind of see how gradually I fill in all of the empty space. And that's my choice. You don't have to fill in all the empty spaces with flowers. You could actually choose a slightly different kind of design. This part is completely up to you. What I've chosen to do is fill the entire skull with these floral and a few non-floral elements. But you certainly don't have to fill up the whole skull. Next up, I'm going to put my eye pieces in place. You can see that I cut out 2 circles for the eyes and a little teardrop for the nose, and then a little mouthpiece. And I put some flowers on those, but you can still see the black behind them. And then I am going to iron those in place, just as before, 8 to 10 seconds. I'm using about a medium heat. I think I forgot to tell you that earlier. And there you go. This part's complete. Now I'm going to put something called fray check around the edges. This is if you're worried about fraying of the fabric. You don't have to do this, especially if you're going to be using a more permanent bonding adhesive that you're not going to sew around the edges. but you may want to go ahead and do it anyway. It's up to you. Okay, now you can see I've put this finished piece upside down. So I've put it facing down onto my cardboard, and I'm going to apply the adhesive to the back. And then I'm going to cut it out. And I'm not being really careful, I'm not getting really close to the edge to cut that part out. I'm going to come back with a smaller pair of scissors so that I can really get into the different little edges. Now you'll see later that I ended up smoothing out the edges, and that was just something I did. You don't have to do that. You can leave yours with the with all the little bits and pieces of flowers poking out. Okay, and just going all the way around. And it doesn't take terribly long. This is sped up a little bit, but not a whole lot. And of course, you may need to rest your hands along the way because cutting a lot with scissors can be hard on the hands. So I've cut my piece out, and this is it. That's my final design, but this was an earlier design that I had kind of tried out to see how it would look. And so this is what I was talking about earlier. If you wanted to design your sugar skull with less flowers in it so that the eyes and nose and mouth really pop out and you can still see kind of a skull behind it, you could do it like this. Next up, I'm going to show you how to sew around the edges of the final applique. So what I've done here is I've set my sewing machine to a zigzag stitch, and I've placed the fabric, my backing fabric is a black fabric, and I've placed that behind. This is going to be the final fabric that I've put the actual applique sugar skull onto. I'm going to actually turn this fabric piece into a bag later on, but for now I'm just sewing around the edges. And again, it's a zigzag stitch. I put it with a long stitch, but close together. So when you see the end of it, you'll see what I mean. And it takes a little bit of zhuzhing to get around, so don't go at a super fast speed. This is a speeded up film. I went at about, I started off slowly and then I went at a medium speed with my zigzag stitch. And here's the finished product. You can see they're really close together, but they look very nice. Thanks for watching, and happy sewing.